Okay, we're all cleaned up, ironed up, trimmed up around the edges. Got all of our edges smoothed out. Now I'm going to come through and we're going to work on these fabric rivets that come right through the center of this. If you look, I believe you can probably see those on the video. We've got 4 holes already drilled right here for the fabric rivets. What I'm going to do first off, so I'm going to take I've got a 2-inch wide strip. It's going to be a 2-inch tape across there, so I'm going to go ahead and pre-mark that. I've got a little mark in the center here so I can find it. I just line that up with the hole. Mark that on each side. Do the same thing right up here. Mark that on each side. Then I can just lay my strip right in, find my marks. Just draw that right down the side of that fabric. Then I know exactly where my tape's going to lay. Then I'll take my poly tack. I'll put just a little line of it right down through the center. Just like that. And that's going to be a base for my polyester reinforcing tape, which is right here. 1/2 inch wide, self-adhesive. Gonna let that tack up a little bit. While that's tacking up, I'm going to go ahead and burn these holes. Got my soldering iron warmed up. I'm just going to press that down. I'm just going to burn through each one of those holes where the rivet goes. Then I'll pre-cut this piece of tape to the right length. Just going to run it past that hole just about 1/2 inch on each side. Cut that off. Strip the backing off of it. I'm going to lay that reinforcing tape right down to the center of those holes. I can see them down through it, so it's pretty easy to get it in the right spot. And just a little bit past each one. Get that down like that. Your soldering iron back up, go ahead and burn a hole through that also. And we've got our fabric rivets. We'll use these same ones on the wings and the vertical stabilizer and the horizontal stabilizers. What these are is a 1/8 inch grip aluminum rivet with a large head. We'll drop each one of them down through the hole. Just like that. And we'll get our rivet gun, we'll go ahead and pop them into place. Now you don't want to press down real hard while you're pressing these, just press them down until they're solid, and then take the pressure off the gun, because when it slips off the side, it will go through the fabric. Alright. Now I normally use a 2-inch brush to brush this 2-inch wide piece of glue line right here. I'm going to do for a base for my tape, but I don't happen to have one handy right now. I'm just going to use a 1-inch brush. And I'm going to do a glue line right across the front. I'm going to come right down the side. I'm going to keep this as neat as I can possibly keep it inside of that pencil mark that we made, or actually right to the edge of it. You want to just kind of seal that line going down through there. using quite a bit of product on this because we want it to soak right through that reinforcing tape and just really glue that down. Right to the edge of that pencil line. The neater you keep it, the neater your project's going to look when you're finished. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to take some of our 2-inch pinking tape. I use all lightweight tapes. There's no sense using the big heavy tapes on these little airplanes. I'm going to use a pair of pinking shears to cut the distance. And I'm going to lay this straight across the tail feather so I can get the angle that I'm looking for. Like that. And then I generally knock the little corner off like that. It'll stay down a lot better if you do that. And then we'll just kind of not touch that into the glue, but I'm going to check my distance here. And you see I need to take about that much off of that. Use pinking shears the same way. Just like that. And that's ready to glue down, but first we've got to wait for this glue to set. This is actually poly brush that I put down on here, not the poly tack. When you're out in open fabric areas doing tape, you want to use the poly brush adhesive adhesive and sealant rather than the poly tack because it's a lot more flexible. So I'm going to turn off, let that dry. As soon as that's dry, we'll jump back on and finish that right out. All right, we've glued our base coat down on our fabric rivets on the side of the vertical stabilizer. We've pre-cut our piece of pinking tape. We're going to lay this in where we want it to live. You can center it right up between those lines. And pre-drawing those lines when you glue that makes it to where you end up with a very straight tape line. Works very well. We can take our glue brush, go ahead and start sticking that down. I prefer to do that in one stroke, so I'm going to go ahead and cheat up and use my 3-inch brush and just put it in at an angle so it'll work like a 2-inch. I'm just going to tape that right down through there, holding quite a bit of pressure down on that. Yeah. And then right up to the front edge, right over the edge like that. Make sure you're not running over the front edge. Wet it up a little bit more. And go ahead and get that pressed on down into those rivets and that reinforcing tape. Like that. And lay them down over the edge. One more time across to get the bubbles out. And you can see that that laid real nice over the top of all those rivets. There'll be just a little bit of an air bubble on each side of them, and that's normal. Make sure your tape's stuck down well and don't have anything running over the edges. Yeah. Just like that. Now, when that sets up, we want to go ahead and run one more coat of poly brush over the top of that to go ahead and seal that down in there. I've already done the other side with the first coat, so we'll just go ahead and put it the second coat on now. You can see where it's got a little dry spot along some of the edges, so we'll just go ahead and put a second coat on that. Get right on through there. And that is very neatly done. Put a roll of tape here. We're going to get that thing set up kind of flat so nothing runs anywhere underneath. Looks very good. All right, that's got our vertical stabilizer covered complete. That's ready to go. It's already ironed to temperature. We've already taped our lines. We'll let those dry, and we'll put one more coat of poly brush on the other side of the tape. And this one's ready to tack cloth off and do a brush coat on. But we're going to set it off to the side when this sets up and go ahead and cover our rudder, and we'll brush coat both of those at the same time. Alright, our vertical stabilizer is finished and ready for brush coat. I'm going to start covering this rudder. So we've already pre-cut our fabric. And we put a little letter on it so we can remember which side was which. And there's the A right there. And there's the A on our fabric. We know that wraps back under to that. And we've already pre-glued our leading edge, the bottom of the rudder and the top of the rudder. So we'll set this fabric on here, flip it over and get our register mark in the right spot. Right there, got it right there. So we know that's what we're looking for. Lay it back out there. And we can see that we can have about that much of a lap over on that. So we're going to kick the rest of that fabric out of our way. We know that's where we want our rudder covering to lay. The first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cut a little notch for the rudder horn right here, and we'll have to cut another little notch for the tiller arm. So we'll just go ahead and glue us a little line down through here to keep our fabric from fraying. And we'll glue another little line where that's going to land roughly. We'll let that dry and we'll be ready to cut that into place. Okay, we've glued a little line right here where our rudder horn comes through. We're going to go ahead and just snip a line back through there right beside it. Keep it straight in line. And we'll just go ahead and pull that loose. Then I like to just do a little cut out each side. Just like that. That way that pulls down nice and neat over that front. Then we'll follow this right down to here. Figure out where that needs to cut through to. Just like that. Then we'll take our MEK rag. We've already got a bed of glue on the surface itself. Then we'll just make sure that this is nice and centered up around that. And Everything seems to be laying nice and straight. We'll just go ahead and glue that right across there with the soaking a little MEK through. That'll do that right there. Then again, we're going to double check, make sure we're all good there. And we're just going to continue right on across the front of this rudder, just like that. Okay, let's just let that tack up for just a moment. So that we can pull a little tension as we go forward and not pull this fabric away from that rudder horn. Just let that kind of set up until it starts to turn white again. When you see it start turning white, you can see it start to set up. Then you can start pulling a little tension and it's not going to walk away with you. So we'll just continue this right on up to the front edge. I kind of roll my fabric around as I'm going to make sure I'm kind of keeping a straight line. We'll just go ahead and glue that right on across there. Take that right on up to the tip. If you let that lay kind of natural, it'll find its own home there and everything will work out just great for us. Alright, we'll go ahead and take our glue and we're going to go ahead and just glue that right on up there. Right in this area here where we had pre-glued that edge, let's just pull that out, put a little bit of glue back up in here, because that's not going to soak through well right there. We'll do the same thing on this side. Let's go ahead and put this little glue up in there. Then we'll just go ahead and tack that right on down. Got some glue in behind it. We'll lay that right over. Tack that right in place too. Then we'll go ahead and glue right on down this line here. All the way down to that very end right there. And you can see your glue soaking through the fabric and turning dark. That means you're getting good penetration on your glue. If it doesn't want to soak in real well, you might want to thin your glue out just a little bit. Poly tack. And we'll just continue working right on down the line. Soak that right on in there, all the way up to the tip. Just like that. We'll go ahead and let that set up for just a little bit, and then we're going to pull our fabric kind of tight, and we're just going to drop some glue around this edge. We're going to have to let that set up for just a moment. Then we'll be able to go ahead and tack this right on around this edge here, and we'll tack right up around the top edge of the rudder. Okay, we've let that set up for just a couple of minutes. Now what I want to do is I want to just get a good glue line around the edge of this rudder horn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tension my fabric to the back right here. I'm going to kind of get that just to lay down where it's wants to lay naturally across through there. Get our glue. We're going to come up onto the rudder horn and let that flow down over that fabric. Just like that. We're going to go ahead and get a good base of glue there because we're going to have to do some ironing on this before we put our reinforcing packs. It's going to go around and reinforce that just like we did around the gear leg sockets on the fuselage. So we're going to go ahead and let that set up for a moment. While that's setting up, we can go ahead and work on this right through here. Seems to be staying just fine. On this, instead of soaking this with the MEK, we're going to go ahead and just glue a nice neat line down through here. And go ahead and pay attention to make sure that that glue just gets right on through there, soaks into that. And we're going to continue right on down the line. We won't worry about getting around that back edge quite yet. We just want this to stick to that real well. I can see that all flowing through there and getting really good and stuck around that edge. So we'll let that go ahead and set for a moment. This needs to set up a little bit more. And then I'll pull this down where we can get a shot of the top of the rudder. And we'll go ahead and work around the top of the rudder, and we'll also work around the trailing edge of this. Okay, we've let the bottom tack up just a little bit. And we're going to come up and we're going to work around this radius on the top of the rudder. We can roll our fabric back, see what we're working with. We've already glued around this edge. I've got to roll a 2-inch tape under here just to raise this up off the table a little way so that I can have a place to pull a little tension on this. So what we're going to want to do is kind of just start stretching that around there just a little bit to see if we can find a good happy spot for the fabric. So I think we've got that right there. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to hold this in. I'm going to glue around this back edge right here just to hold that in place. And then I'll have to hold that in place until it sets up. What I'm trying to do is stretch that back just a little bit to get some of the excess fabric out of here. I'm just going to come around with a light glue line right around through there, all the way back to there. I'm just going to hang on to that for a moment, let that set up. You don't want that glue to run around real strong back there, so we want to get enough on it that it's that it really tacks itself in place. I'll probably have to hang on to this for 2 or 3 minutes, so we'll get back on in just a moment and we'll continue on around the front. We want this to stick real well right here so that we don't have to keep fighting it. We've let this dry around this back edge where we glued it for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes. I'm just going to let that set up kind of solid. I'm going to take a little bit of glue and I'm going to come up underneath this front right here, because I can see I don't have a good solid connection there. So I'm just forcing my bristles right in behind there, and I want to get that glued down well. You can just pull it into place. And we're just going to continue to work our way right around this front. You can pull quite a bit of tension on that because we've already tacked the other side, so we're not going to pull too much out of it. We're just going to glue a line right around to about right there. We won't catch any runs because the other side of this fabric still has to cover the other side of the rudder, so we want to keep it as neat as possible. So I'm going to pull that around like that with my thumb. While that's setting up, I'm going to glue right around this front right here. So I'll start rolling that right around that edge here. And here we are stuck holding apart again, so I'm going to hang on to this until this starts to set up real nice. And then we'll finish our back corner of the bottom of the rudder, and then we'll flip this little guy over and start trimming out for the other side. And there it stays in place, and we'll go ahead and just let that sit there for about 5 minutes or so and let that glue set up. We'll flip it over, and after we, well, the next thing we're going to do is turn around and catch the bottom corner of the back of the rudder and get it glued down. Okay, here we are on the trailing edge of the bottom of the rudder. What we're going to want to do is just kind of stretch this fabric around there just a little bit, pulling a little tension up from the top. You can see that we've already glued to here. We're going to glue back to just about a 1/2 inch beyond the radius so that we can make our cut to fold to the other side. This will be the same system that we use, the same process that we use on our elevators and the back corners of the ailerons and flaps. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this right now back to here. One thing I forgot to mention when we started covering this rudder is we are covering the side of the rudder right now that has the holes in it for our hinges, so that when we wrap to the other side and wrap our seam back like we did on our vertical stabilizer, it falls right along the same side that the seam's on the vertical stabilizer. So we always cover all of our parts starting with the side that the hinges are going on. So we're just going to go ahead and soak this down a little bit right through here, and we're going to run a little extra glue up the side because we're going to have to make a cut in that. And once I get that to where I like it, I'm going to pull that on down kind of tight. Make sure that glue gets in there real nice. Stick that right in there. And we're just going to kind of hang on to that until it likes where it lives. Okay, we've let our glue set up around this little corner here just for a couple of minutes. Next thing we're going to need is to be able to pull this fabric down along this edge. So we need to know how far that's going to be. But we're going to do a little pre-glue right here where our cut's going to be. And we know it's going to go right out through there, because we're going to work our way around this little tiller arm right here. We're going to pull that back out and let that go ahead and start setting up. And then we're going to take the rudder, we're going to set it up on its edge and fold the fabric over. We're going to find our center line right off this edge so that we can go ahead and start tucking the other side and getting everything laid in, top and bottom. I think we've got everything fairly well glued. All I'm going to do right here is I'm just going to draw a pencil line down to the bottom of that tiller arm to the other side of the rudder. And we're just going to cut a line, and we're just going to cut that piece out so that can tuck on the inside. Okay, we've gone ahead and turned our rudder over. We've got our end trimmed where it's going around the tiller arm on the bottom. We're already glued along this edge all the way back to this first rib right here. And what we want to do is we want to find the center of that tube, because we need to cut our fabric in a straight line all the way back through here. So to do that, we're just going to fold our fabric back over all the way down, pull everything out nice and neat. Get our pencil, we're going to pull that out where we can see the side of the rudder, or the back at trailing edge, and we just want to draw a line right down through the center right there. And we want to get our fabric to where it lays over there straight. And then we want to just continue this center line right on out our fold. And then go ahead and do a pre-glue line on that all the way through here. And that'll give us our cut mark. We're going to start this cut with a razor blade. Actually, we'll start it in with a pair of scissors, and we'll finish it up with a razor blade because we're going to cut right in the center of that tube. And then this little pucker of fabric that you see right here, it'll fold back over the other side when we start to finish our seam on the opposite side. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom edge of the rudder. Let's slide this up so you can see it. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom of the rudder. Right here, you can see my glue line comes right around to there. So I want to hit the center line of the tube right there. Pull my fabric up, and I want to draw a line right down that center line again, right on out. Just like that. And pre-glue that line so that I can cut that and it doesn't fray. Don't have to go all the way out because we're just going to use a small amount of fabric right there. Alright, then we can just drape our fabric back out right off of the table. And we can see our pencil line right through here, and we can see where our trailing edge comes. We just want a little crease right in there. And we're shooting for just a straight cut right up to here, and then we'll razor blade off just a little piece in there. So we'll just start out by cutting that line along our pencil line that we can see through from the other side. And we're going to cut that right up to about right there. So I'm going to go get us a brand new razor blade. Because we need it to be extremely sharp so it cuts a real nice straight line. So we'll get our razor blade out of its packet. And then we can still see our pencil line that we drew in there. And we're just going to cut it right up to the center line of that tube, which is about right there. And then we want to have, when we lap our fabric back over, we want to see that we're going to be able to wrap plenty of fabric back over that. And we're actually going to let this fold back just a little way so that's not a cut the whole way. So we'll have just a little bit of a lap right there, and that will not show when we're done. So we'll pull this up to the other end, and we'll do the same thing to the bottom of the rudder. Same thing to the bottom of the rudder here. I'm going to shoot for right in there, and then we're just going to cut that back just a little ways, just to the edge of the radius. Then at that point we can go ahead and start folding all this on over and getting that sealed up and fold this stuff in. So we're going to go ahead and turn this rudder around. You need to be a little bit careful because you really don't want to break your glue joint loose where we're glued here and here. So I'm just going to turn this little guy around, set him right in there. And we're going to go ahead and make our cut. Our cut for this, we want to cut around the front edge. We want to cut around the front edge of the little rib bumps, all the way around the front edge, and let that lap around the back. So I just start out by cutting around that edge. I cut right back and just get a little bit deep into the rudder right there. Get to the next one. I just trim right around him like that. and right on back. Then what we end up with is the same way we did our vertical stabilizer. We can wrap that beyond the apex of the tube where the fabric's going to land. That's going to just land right in there like that. So I'm going to do that all the way down to the other end. Slide up and around those bumps. Get in a little bit deep into the rudder with the rest of your fabric. And what that does, it keeps us from having a cut line show in the fabric as it wraps from the other side. And all of this seems to be about the right depth, so all we're going to do from there is just cut around our ribs right here. Same thing right here. And then we're going to lap this in, so we're going to go ahead and cut this right off even with the top edge of our leading edge of the rudder, because this will be a different tuck that we're doing there. So we're ready to roll with that. The first thing to do, just go ahead and get your MEK rag. And just go ahead and start wrapping that right on in there. Just like that. Start wrapping that right on in there. You can hold this down with your other finger and it'll help hold it in place. This method works extremely well, because it actually smooths it out as you go. And we're going to use this same technique as we're doing the leading edges of our elevators. It's the same method for the leading edge of your ailerons and flaps. And now at this point, the holes for the hinges are on the opposite side of the rudder. So when we bring our fabric over, we'll do our finished seam on those. We'll just keep wrapping this right over. And you can see it turning darker as it goes through. We got a little bit of glue a little bit deep on this, but the MEK wakes that glue right back up and it'll soak back through after just a couple of seconds. So we want to make sure that we have that well soaked through there, because we're just going to glue right onto the top of this. We're going to do this all the way to the other end. Hold this one down for just a second so that gets a nice contour around there. And we've got this anti-chafe taped around this rudder horn. So this is actually double security for the fabric coming from the other side that is down. Once it's down, it'll act as a chafe barrier. So we'll go ahead and stick that down right there, right back in there. And we're going to come back with a little glue and tack all that down, because we'll fray those back edges if we try and rub this in there. Have to hold that down for just a second. Just right up to the other end. can see it turning dark as it starts soaking through there. Okay, we'll drop that back in our MEK bucket. Then we'll get our glue, and we're going to just come in here and just run us a little line under that fabric right here and right here, and we'll go ahead and get those tucking down. And you can see the way that just sucks right down there when it gets right. Okay, and then we're going to take our glue and we're going to go ahead and glue this all the way around to the inside. Just make sure that's down real nice and solid. By this stage of the game, you should be starting to get pretty good with your brush, and you don't have to do quite so much cleanup. If you start to get used to how much glue to put on your brush and not let it run all over the place on you. And again, as the glue's soaking through, the MEK is starting to dry that tacked it down for us, so we can start seeing. Now I got a little bit of glue over the leading edge right there. You don't want that to drip into the inside. You can actually see that glue soaking through that fabric. And gluing that down. And what we're doing by putting quite a bit extra glue on the top of this is we're making a nice glue base for our fabric coming from the other side. And you can go back and kind of double check yourself, make sure it's not running off anywhere. And just take that right on up to the tip. I generally don't drag my parts around on the table like I'm doing right there, just in case there's a little burr or something. We don't want to take a chance on snagging our fabric. I'm moving the part around a lot to keep it framed up in the camera so that you can see what I'm doing. Put a little glue under that. It was sealed earlier, so it didn't take real well. Alright. Now we're going to go ahead and let this set up. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap our fabric to the inside. When we're done with these open areas, like on the bottom of the rudder, sides of the elevators, the sides of the ailerons, they'll all be done the same way. I take my top fabric and I wrap it around this way. Then when I cover the bottom of the rudder, elevators, and ailerons, I take the top layer of fabric and I lap that again, so it's actually a double layer of fabric all the way across the open bays on the outside edges. Right in here. It'll be covered from the bottom and from the top. Okay, so we got our shoe iron, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just iron this right around the inside edge right here. Make sure that stays well out of our way when we're covering from the other side. It's good to let that tack up for just a few minutes like I did to not get all the glue all over your iron. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stick this down well. Then we're going to start shrinking this edge right here. I'm going to pull this out of the way so you don't hit it with your shoe iron. You don't want to shrink any of that. We're going to need every little bit of it. Pull that right up in there. Make sure that we don't have any wrinkles that are going to show through. Okay. And then we'll trim this out to right there. We'll go ahead and fold this back because we didn't actually glue it. We just kind of shrunk it around through there, so we're going to get a little glue behind it. And we're going to lay that right down and glue it right into place. Put the glue up on there. And we glued right around that edge, right around that corner, heading right down into the rudder. And then I'm going to add a little bit of extra glue right where that seam laps right there. Catch our little run under there. Make sure everything's laying in nice and neat. And we'll let that set up. We'll take the shoe iron. I'm just going to pull this area down in here and go ahead and tuck all this around the front of the rudder rib. Just like that. Then we can take our iron. It is sitting at 350 degrees, but we should be tacked up enough to go ahead and tighten this edge right here. Right down through there, just like that. And I like to go ahead and get that right on out of the way. Just go ahead and stick that right around that edge. Everything look as neat as you can. Alright, now that's nice and tight, already ironed to 350, and then when we wrap our fabric over, we're going to glue another layer right over the top of that. Alright, we're ready to turn this guy around and do the top. Okay, we've pulled our fabric up from the bottom side. We've already glued our front edge, everything's good. We pulled from the bottom side. We've pulled right around the front, and we've tucked our fabric right around the inside. We've just trimmed it off about a 3/8 of an inch after we wrapped it over so that we could wrap it to the inside. And we've already sealed our edge around through here, and we've already heated this to 350 degrees, so that's good and tight there. And this end will end up being covered twice. It's covered from this side, and then when we cover that, we're going to cover that edge again. So we're finished with the bottom of the rudder, and we're going to go ahead and turn this baby over now and do the top. Okay, now we're looking at the top of our rudder. We're going to have to use our shoe iron because we're actually going to have to shrink this fabric around to the inside edge. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stretch it and get all the fabric working in our favor. So we're going to stretching it over the edge, stretch it over the edge, just like that. Now we'll get our shoe iron. We're going to start shrinking this fabric. So we're just going to pull a little tension back like that. We'll just shrink it right into there. We'll shrink a little more out of there. Shrink a little more out of there. Our iron's set at 350 degrees. We're going ahead and shrinking it right on up. So we just keep stretching and shrinking as we go around the corner. Stretching and shrinking. Stretching and shrinking. Pull that right on up, shrink that around there. You can see how that's starting to work in our favor now. Just keep right on shrinking that around. Go back, shrink it a little more and a little further back. Alright. Now we'll take our glue. We're going to go ahead and do a little pre-glue around this. Just like that. We'll let that set up and we'll trim that around, and we'll start tucking it to the inside. Alright, we've done just a little pre-glue around the inside edge of our top of our rudder. I'm going to come in about 3/8 of an inch. And just go ahead and start cutting that right around the inside of that top bow on our rudder. You can draw a pencil line around that if you like. Makes it a little easier to cut a straight line. So we're cutting now, and we know we can wrap that right to the inside edge. So we're just going to take this one in little steps. I'm going to start out with that little section right there. You want to be careful not to run your glue around the other side of your rudder, or it'll show through on the other side. So we're just going to start tucking this around like that. Watch tucking your fingers in too far, because they'll leave fingerprints on the other side. It's not a very deep area to work in. So we're just laying that fabric right over the top edge like that. Okay. And we'll grab us another little piece of it. Gluing right back all the way around. I've got my bristles all the way down in the fabric, all the way around the top edge. And I'm getting that fabric good and wet right through there. So we can go ahead and start wrapping that right on around. Just like that. And you see, by pre-shrinking that, we've eliminated a lot of fabric. It just falls right around in there. Just like that. Just keep tucking that around, finding clean fingers as we go. And just kind of stretch that fabric over. If it starts to wrinkle back a little ways, we want to get a good glue joint here, all the way down to the inside edge. Just kind of let that set up for just a little bit there. That looks really good in there. Now what we've done is we've cut our fabric to where it doesn't quite touch the other side. We're just wrapped to the inside apex of that tube. We'll just come back in. We'll lift that up with our brush. Shoot the brush right back up in there. A little bit of glue around the other side. Can't be helped sometimes. Alright, then we're going to take our glue. We're going to double glue this area right in here. Tuck a little bit under there. Catch our runs from the other side. Glue that right around there. Alright, we're going to let this set up. And our next step is to fold our fabric back to this other side. We're ready to cover the other side of the rudder. Okay, we've got our rudder flipped over. We're ready to roll our fabric back. So roll it right out the side. Roll it right out the side. And the first thing we're going to have to do is, just like we did on the other side of the rudder, is we're going to have to glue us a little line right here and right here where those are going to come over. So we know our fabric's going to come straight in, so we want to get it as straight in as possible. And glue us a little line right down to there. And we know this one's going to come in, and it's going to need a glue line right across through there. We'll let that dry. Okay, we've got a little glue line right here over our rudder horn. We know what angle it's going to go at because we've got our fabric tied against here, so I'm just going to press it down to the back of the aileron horn. I'm just going to cut a little line right down to what I believe is the center of that. Use a little more. Pull it back to there. Do just a little relief cut right there. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and pull this around and glue that in place so that it doesn't get away from us. I'm going to glue right down the side of the rudder horn, right across the front of the rudder horn brace. And I'm going to pull that right into where I want it to live, just like that. I'm going to hold that down and let that dry. It's holding well. I'll do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to pull this back, a little glue line along the rudder horn, right across the front edge, and I'm going to pull it in there and lay that into place. And that looks good around the rudder horn. That holds that right in place right there. Let that set up for a little while, but we're going to move right along. Next thing we got is already pre-glued this. We just got a straight cut into our tiller arm. Now you don't want to pull too much tension right here because we want to make sure we can get a lap back here. So we're just going to lay that about right there, kind of naturally. I know I got plenty of lap back there, and I'm just going to glue this little spot right here. I'm not going to glue the rest of this at this moment because I want to make sure my lap works in the back, and if need be, I can always pull this little glue joint loose if I need to and re-glue it later. We're going to let that set like that. Then we're going to go right to the top of the rudder. We're going to pull this down till it's sitting kind of neatly across through there. And we want to stretch this around till we can see that our back lap is going to work out okay. And we're going to keep pulling a little tension until we start to get a nice relaxed look across the front of that. And we're going to go ahead and just tack this in. Again, we want to have the opportunity to untack this if we don't like the way the trailing edge is working out. So we're just going to tack a little spot right there just to hold that in place. Pulling a little tension across the front. And we'll just hold that and let that dry in place there. We've got quite a bit of tension pulled back on this right now, so I'm going to have to hang on to that for just a moment. Make sure that dries well. And that did very well. We're going to go ahead and let that set up for just a little while, and then we're going to flip it over, and we're actually going to glue this back edge on both ends to make sure that we got our radius right, and our fabric is going to wrap correctly. And then we'll come back and we'll glue this front edge. Okay, we've flipped our rudder over. Got the front edge tacked, and what we're going to do is we have a real nice glue joint all the way back to this rib. So now we want to go ahead and split that fabric the rest of the way back to about right there. Then we're going to let the rest of that just have just a little fold in it right there, and we'll be able to pull the rest of our fabric up around this way. So we're going to go ahead and glue that now. So we're just going to pull this out of the way. We'll come back and we're just going to glue around kind of the top edge right there. And we're going to pull that fabric just up that far. We're going to let that go and set up right there. And then we'll come back with our shoe iron and we'll touch all this up right through there, and that'll end up being a nice looking seam. Just hold that in place. We'll get our shoe iron. We're just going to go ahead and stick that well. Fold that seam over just a little ways, just like that. And that'll end up being the finished seam on the back of that. And you can see we've split to about right here. Then we've got a little folded seam right through there that laps over. And then we're actually going to lap this to the inside, or to this side of this, just about a ½ inch onto the other side of the rudder. I'm going to let that sit up just a little bit longer. Not quite yet. And that should be good. Come back to this end. I'm using this little roll of tape under here, mainly just so that the angle's right to see this from the camera. So now, we've already glued on the front edge, and you can see we've only cut back to about right here. We're going to bring this back just a little bit further. So we want to go ahead and stick that fabric down real good there if we can. With heat. We've already got glue underneath it. And that's going to do a fine job for us. We're going to get our razor blade. First we're going to see if we do need to cut it back any. See, that's going to want to fold all the way back to there. So we are going to come back just a little bit further. We're just pulling the fabric out into the razor blade. We're not actually cutting into the aluminum there. That looks like that's going to work out all right. And we're going to pull that just like that up into there. So we'll go ahead and get some glue around this edge. Back into there. The excess out. And we're just going to go ahead and wrap this right on up in there. Just like we know what we're doing. And you can see we're going to end up with just a little bit of fold beyond that tear, or the cut. It's going to work out real nice. I'll let that tack up for just a moment. I'm going to have to hold that one for a moment. Holding our tension up now. Just going to go ahead and touch up with our shoe iron. Roll that fold over. We want to shrink that fabric just a little bit right there. Make sure that this is staying put. Add a little heat to it. Alright, that should be there for life. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and roll the rudder back over. We're going to go ahead and let that set up for just a little bit because that's actually going to be laying on it. We don't want to turn it loose, so we're going to let it set up just a little bit and then we're going to roll it over and finish up the leading edge. We've already got the top of our rudder wrapped up on the other side and cleaned up on the inside. We've glued around our trailing edge of the top of the rudder, the trailing edge of the bottom of the rudder. Now we've just got to get this fabric down, stuck on this side so that we can pre-iron all of this to go ahead and stick everything around. We're also going to wrap our front edge right here. So we'll get our MEK rag to start with. We'll just go ahead and pull this over just a little bit right there. Stick that right in there. Right up where we've already pre-glued all of this. Back edge here. We'll do that all the way up to the tip here. We'll come back with our glue. Just go ahead and run a little glue line across this. That well stuck down. Across that edge. Across through here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and let that tack up for just a moment. And then we'll start getting all of this wrapped around on the top and the bottom. We've glued across the front edge up here just around the apex, just to the front edge. We're going to glue the rest of that after we preheat this fabric so that nothing has any wrinkles in it anywhere. But right now we've already glued around this edge right here, around this little radius earlier. And we're going to just pull a little tension down right here. And we're just going to tack this right along this top edge here so that we can get a little tension on everything. So we'll get our glue. And we'll just glue right across that edge right there. We'll just let that set up for just a moment while I'm holding a little tension under here. Just give that just a minute to find itself. Start to set up. And then we can go ahead and glue right on up to the front edge. Just like that. Tension down on that. Rub that in where it finds a nice spot there. And we pre-glued this right here when we cut that around, so I'm going to just run the brush up under the edge of that just a little bit. Get a little glue up in there. Just getting a few of the bristles up underneath there. A little glue underneath it. Get that to stick down real nice in there, because we're going to go ahead and heat this up to 250. So we want to make sure everything stays put. We're not going to do the final wrap on this till after we get a little tension on everything. So we want to make sure we got a smooth edge to glue to. We'll let that set up for just a moment. Okay, after we've let that set up for about 10 minutes or so right here, we're going to go ahead and come back with our iron. We don't want to heat real strong around this edge. We just want to make sure that everything is setting real nice and uniform along this edge, because this is the only glue joint we're going to have when we start tensioning this to hold it in place. We just want to make sure everything is down well. And that looks good. Then we go and turn our rudder around. And our next mission is to get this shaping in here. I normally take a little roll of tape, throw it under here so it holds it up off the table for me. Get it setting on a rib. Then we can pull some tension and start to shape that around that leading edge. So you can see a little tension pulling in here. I'm actually stretching that fabric and starting to shape it around that leading edge right there. Slightly pulling, find a nice spot. We got a little wrinkle right there, so we'll just pull it a little further out this way. Get that gone. And I just roll my hand right up underneath there and start gathering up everything so that we can glue that leading edge, or the top edge. So right now we're looking pretty good from here back to this edge. So we'll go ahead and take that. We're just going to glue from here to here, right along the top edge of that. And in the earlier step, of course, we already glued from here back up to there, so that should be good and solid. So we'll just hang on to that. Get a nice edge around through there. Little wrinkles in it. Let that set up for a moment. There's a nice spot around through there already, so we'll just go ahead and head right on with it. We'll do that right around there. Catch any of your runs going over the edge, because we're going to have to use that fabric. Is going to be our top lap. Like that. Just hang on to that until that starts to set up. Sometimes you have to hold that for a couple of minutes. get our shoe iron. Just go ahead and come around and make sure all that is sitting down real nice right there. I believe we've got that setting where we like it. Okay, now we're glued across the bottom edge. We're glued all the way around the top. We're going to let that set for about 15-20 minutes. And we're going to go ahead and fire up our big iron and get it set to 250 degrees. We're going to come back and iron all this, and we'll be ready to wrap everything to the other side. Okay, we've got a nice glue joint across this top edge over here, all the way around the top of our rudder right here, around the bottom of our rudder right here, and glued along the front edge on the opposite side here. We're ready to iron this up to 250 degrees. And the reason that we're ironing this, you can see how much loose fabric we've got right here right now. We want to be able to bring this seam from the other side. We want to bring this right up to just beyond the holes from our, where our rivets are going into our hinges. So to do that, we need to make sure all this is tight in here. So I generally just start right in here. And I just go ahead and iron a line right down to the other end, just to kind of pull some of the loose fabric out. Just like that. Then we'll just go ahead and start probably about in this corner bay right here. We'll just start ironing that right back to those tips. We'll just iron this bay all the way to the front. So right now we want to make sure that we don't touch our fabric that's come over from the other side. We don't want to put any creases in it. Just iron that just like that. And then what we'll do from there is we'll just step from side to side to keep from pulling the fabric in a odd direction. We'll get right in this one. Line that right on up to this edge up here. Like that. We'll go do one more bay on this side to get us evened up. Right around the tips of those. Be kind of careful not to run your iron over the rivets on the ends of these tubes. Right back through there. We've got to remember we're not doing a finish iron here. All we're doing is just pulling tension so that we can finish up our seams. We don't want to get too much tension on this that it wants to pull everything loose, because we're just roughly tacked in all the way around. We can get real close. Back edge. And then we still haven't put a reinforcing patch around our rudder horn yet, but that's been setting for a little while, so it should be good. That we glued it earlier. We're just not going to get a lot of heat right around the edge of that. We just want to just roughly get that pulled up right there. Right up around this end. It's starting to tension up real nice. We'll get right up and around the tip up here. Again, being careful not to put the fabric from the other side so we don't pre-shrink it. We want to keep it where it's at right now. And then right up here on this tip, we'll want to be extremely cautious around our fabric. On the other side, we're just going to kind of iron right around that edge there. Get nice and tight around through there. And then we need to double check something while we're right here. We need to make sure that our fabric isn't glued over too far around that edge and have any dimples along this edge. So we can get our MEK rag, squeeze a little bit of the excess out, and we're just going to come right around this edge, and we're just going to go ahead and go all the way around this, just along the edge, just to make sure that we get a nice, neat MEK line around that edge. We can see that we don't have any puckers by the way that the glue line runs around through there. Let that MEK starts wicking through, just like that. So I can have a few back here. On that, and that looks real nice. Okay, when we get that done, we've already tensioned everything on this side. Let's just go ahead and switch it right over. And iron this side down. So we're starting about our center bay. And I'm just going to take it all the way out to the end right there in the center. Like that. And then we'll pull it all the way up to the tip, like that. Back out the center bay. Now we do that same thing along the trailing edge. Iron it right on out to the tip, like that. That's our center bay. Iron it right out through there. And then we'll start working up to our leading edge, just like that. This one, and then go back to this one, and back up to this one, and we got a center in, like that. We'll work right around the top here, just like that. Now we've got 250 degrees on that. And you can see that we haven't pulled away from our rudder anywhere. Everything is just doing absolutely perfect. So let's go ahead and flip this guy back over. We're going to start up here on our leading edge, and we'll start getting everything cut into where it's going. Okay, now I've turned my shoe iron down to 250 degrees. Now what I want to do is I want to come back through, and I want to make sure that we got everything tensioned around these edges here. So what we're going to do, we're just going to take our shoe iron, we're just going to touch right around the edges, around the front edge, around the point of that, finish up around our rudder horn just a little bit, tension right back through there, and right around the nose, We'll do that all the way down the line. Like that. Lay it in there for a couple seconds and let it find some heat. Like that. Through there. Again, being careful not to touch our fabric on the top. But we're going to wrap around. We want to keep that as neat as possible. Just like that. That all looks real good. Then we'll take our MEK rag out of our little MEK bucket. Squeeze the excess out. Then we're just going to come right along this edge right here. We're going to go ahead and make sure that this fabric from the other side is not glued over too far on any of this. We're going to get that taken care of right now. And all I'm looking for is a nice uniform MEK line along the edge of that. That lets me know we've done a good job. Do that right down to the other end. Do the same thing across this edge down here. So that ends up nice and neat. The neater we end up with on this, the neater our finished product will be. Just like that. Alright, then we'll need to get our piece at 1/2 by 1/2 angle, and we'll go ahead and wrap this back over, and we'll find our finished line there. Okay, we've got our 1/2 by 1/2 angle. Got our pencil, and what we're going to do, we're going to start right up here at the top edge. We're going to roll that angle around until we're just beyond where we've drilled our holes for our rivets, which will put us right along the edge of that hump from the rib. So we'll hold that in place. I can see that little hole through there, so I'm going to go for that spot. I'll pull some tension back with my hand. I'll just go ahead and draw me a line right through there. Right up to that point. Draw our line right on across through here. Like that. Do that all the way down. To the other end. Just like that. Now we've got our line drawn all the way across through here. I'll move this line up just a little bit. That's that one. And that's that one. You got it right where you want it. Then we'll come through with our glue. We'll just go ahead and glue us a little line right across that, keep that from fraying. Like that, roll it out. right across our pencil mark. And then just roll it out. Now we can see our pencil line through from this side, so we'll be able to just cut a nice neat line up through there. And then when we get up to this tip, up to the top side of the rudder, we're just going to take this line, we're just going to cut it out here. We're going to have to iron all this over and get a nice neat lap on all that. So we're just waiting on this glue to dry right there, which shouldn't take just a couple of seconds. Then we'll get our scissors. And we'll go ahead and cut along that line. Follow that line down to the other end. Get that right on out of our way. We'll come back and get this edge. We'll just follow the line from the other side. You'll see it right through the fabric. A nice neat line across through there. And if that felt like that cut good and everything's nice and straight, you can just go and run from there, but you can go back and check your line, make sure you got it, which we did. Then we're ready to get our glue. And go ahead and finish that right on out. Then just lay my brush right in behind the fabric there. And we'll just lay it right on up. And silk on the opposite side, like that. And we'll just come back and rub that in with our finger. Don't rub too hard on that, it'll start to fray those edges back up. So you want to make sure that it just lays up in there real nice and neat. We want a good finished edge there, that's your finished product. So you don't have any runs underneath. And there you go, that's all laying down real nice and neat. We're going to leave that alone. And we'll just start working our way right on back just a little bit at a time. Get that glued up in there. Just lay it down with your fingers. I'm not rubbing right on the edge, just rubbing up to it and letting that last little bit of that edge just kind of lay over there. Get it to where it likes where it's living. Make sure you don't have any runs underneath. And just grab another little section. Keep working our way right onto the top. Okay. Slide that right on over. You gotta kind of pay attention to which direction you're pulling this. If it's on a little bit of a bias, which it is when we come to this side of our rudder, if you rub one direction too hard, it'll start to wrinkle up, but you can just push it right back out the other way. And if anything like that little edge right there doesn't want to stay down, just leave it there. We can come back and touch that with our iron. Check the runs underneath. Get the way right onto the top. That fabric real good. We'll do glue on the outside. Like that. Hold that over. Check the runs underneath. And I'm just going to hang on to this just a moment right there, because I want that to stay over real good for me, because we're going to iron this whole top edge over, and we want it to stay put for us. So that all looks real good all the way down through there. That's our finished seam all the way down through there. So I'm going to hang on to this for just a moment, and I'll get back with you, and we'll start wrapping that bottom edge up and over.